want you to take a look at this New York Times headline about a frightening new project from the people who brought you Project 2025. And here's how the article begins. The conservative Washington-based think tank, best known for spearheading Project 2025, a proposed blueprint for President Trump's second term that called for reshaping the federal government and an extreme expansion of presidential power. Now the Heritage contingent was in Israel, in part, to discuss another contentious policy paper, Project Esther, the foundation's proposal to rapidly dismantle the pro-Palestinian movement in the United States, along with its support at schools and universities, at progressive organizations, and in Congress. Drafted in the wake of Hamas's attack on Israel in 2023 and the mounting protests against the war in Gaza, Project Esther outlined an ambitious plan to fight anti-Semitism by branding a broad range of critics of Israel as effectively a terrorist support network so that they could be deported, defunded, sued, fired, expelled, ostracized, and otherwise excluded from what it considered open society. Project Esther's architects envisioned outcomes that at the time might have seemed far-fetched. Curriculum it believed to be sympathetic to a Hamas support narrative would be taken out of schools and universities, and supporting faculty would be removed. Social media would be purged of content deemed to be anti-Semitic. Institutions would lose public funding. Foreign students who pushed for Palestinian rights would have their visas revoked or be deported. And joining me now to discuss all of this is a group of three really, really great guests. Beth Miller, political director of Jewish Voice for Peace and Jewish Peace Action. Barry C. Trachtenberg, the Michael R. and Deborah K. Rubin Presidential Chair of Jewish History at Wake Forest University. And Dov Kent, U.S. Senior Director of the Diaspora Alliance. Thank you all for being here.
Our pleasure.
So let's go through this. I'm going to put up some graphics, thank you, that you all sent to me. And I guess I'll ask Beth to sort of start here. Let's talk about what Project Esther's Endgame is and give us the timeline of sort of when it came to be.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on, Joy. Project Esther was introduced by, as you just explained, the ultra-conservative kind of Trump-aligned think tank, the Heritage Foundation, in October of 2024. And it basically sets out a 12 to 24-month plan for a public-private partnership to try to crush and dismantle the Palestinian rights movement in the United States. And we should be very clear here. This blueprint claims to be about anti-Semitism, but it has absolutely nothing to do with Jewish safety and is entirely geared toward destroying a movement that is trying to stop a genocide and toward sharpening authoritarian tools that can then be used against other progressive movements. That is their goal. That is their end game.
Is there a piece of it? I mean, naming it Project Esther seems like it has sort of a meaning, Beth, that might not be a positive one for women.
So the name Project Esther actually comes from the Purim story and Queen Esther, who kind of helped save the Jewish people in this story. But I think what's really ironic about them choosing this name is that Jewish people were not involved in the writing of Project Esther. That is actually clear in the New York Times article that you just, the reporting they found and what other people have looked into it. This was written by white Christian nationalists, many of whom are themselves anti-Semitic. And if you read through Project Esther, it's riddled with conspiracy theories that are themselves very anti-Semitic. And so it's the irony and the kind of pain of them trying to pull from a Jewish story to create this title it's absurd. And it kind of speaks to the ways in which this project actually knows nothing about Jewish Americans, has nothing to do with Jewish safety, and is really just about kind of dividing our communities and dismantling our civil liberties.
And Barry Trachtenberg, that seems to be a through line with a lot of these attacks on universities, on Harvard University, on Columbia, you name it, and these attempts to extort money from UCLA and USC and to try to get them all to pay $1 billion or $500 million to the Trump administration, all of that, a lot of the push on it is not Jewish people. It is evangelicals. It's white evangelical Christian men, for the most part, who seem to be the most zealous on this stuff, and white evangelical Christian members of Congress, United States Senate, and also members of the Trump administration. Can you talk about that and some of the tactics that they lay out in this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. What these groups have done, who largely come from Christian nationalist backgrounds, they have sought to weaponize anti-Semitism in order not to help make life safe for Jews on our college campuses, but to dismantle so many of the structures that have sustained our universities.
Oh, there you go, Barry. I think
for so long.
Start again. They've weaponized anti-Semitism.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wi-Fi went out for a moment.
Yeah, so these groups are weaponizing anti-Semitism in order to dismantle our universities and the work that we do. They are using anti-Semitism as a means to take apart our DEI institutions, our academic freedom, our courses in ethnic studies, none of which makes life any safer for Jewish students, and in fact increases the hostility on campus for all of our students and all of our faculty. You know, the people behind Project Esther believe that universities are hotbeds of radicalism, that university professors are grooming students to overthrow the government. You know, I wish we had that sort of power over our students. That means they would do their homework. They would come prepared for classes if we had that type of authority. You know, at our best, universities are places where we can have the free exchange of ideas, where we could investigate social problems. We can try and test out solutions to make a better, more democratic society. But this is exactly what the Heritage Foundation and Christian nationalists don't want to happen. They want to create societies that are based along strict right-wing agendas that will deny the diversity and freedoms that we have fought so hard to sustain in our institutions. And they are weaponizing anti-Semitism in this particular way to try to take these structures apart.
Dov, let me get you in here, because you guys sent me a little thing on the core tactics here, and I want you to go through those tactics. And I think that is a key point that I think is very actually important to hone in on. So go through these tactics, Dov Kent, if you could explain what they are and how they resonate.
Sure. So the plan calls for a whole host of tactics. It calls for using tools including anti-terrorism and anti-racketeering, criminal prosecution, deportations, public firings, removal of tax-exempt status, blocking of funding, and campaigns to sow discord within movements to disrupt and degrade the organizations. And I want to add to what Beth was saying that Project Esther's scope, it says that it is starting with Palestine rights groups, but it actually targets a really wide spectrum of liberal donors, foundations, and organizations. The plan names anti-capitalist groups and claiming that all of these are aligned with, quote, America's overseas enemies. And all this really just sets the stage for guilt by association and exposes the true intent of Project Esther, which is dismantling civil society institutions such as universities, such as nonprofit organizations, as a way to get rid of any domestic opposition to the Trump administration. And it's all under the pretext of protecting Jews. So the Christian right is really using us as a tip of the spear for an assault on democracy that they had planned long before the production of this report.
So we're having a little bit of trouble. I think everyone's in stormy weather today, so we're having a little bit of trouble with folks. I guess they're your signals here. So we're going to try again. I'm going to go back to Beth, because I think, Beth, you might have had the strongest signal. But I want to reiterate a little bit. I could kind of make out a lot of what Dov Kent was saying, but I want you to try to reiterate it, Beth, if you could. Because the reason I think it's really important for us to focus on this story and on these attacks on these universities, and particularly on the protesters, is because these protesters have a certain number of things in common that I think bother the far right. They are largely multiracial, multicultural groups of young people. They are protesting. They are talking about things like colonialism. They are rethinking known and sort of settled history. And they themselves like sort of exhibit DEI. They're diverse. They're curious. They are not listening to necessarily authority. They're standing up against authority. These are all the things that if you want to build a fascist state, you have to get rid of, right? And it is, to me, non-coincidental that the same people who make the most noise about supposed anti-Semitism on campus are also the most anti-DEI. So they don't want a diverse campus. They want a less diverse campus. They want a more militarized campus. They don't mind like the way campuses spend money on, military research. What they mind is Jewish, Muslim, Black, white, brown, Asian students coming together to say that a genocide is wrong, that the military being used to kill children is wrong, then that autocracy is wrong, right? And isn't that kind of the point?
Yes. I think that is exactly a core piece of this here. What we're seeing on college campuses right now is what we've actually seen at many different moments in history, where students are at the forefront of social justice movements and change. What we are seeing are college students, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, who are seeing a genocide live streamed on their phones, and they know that it is being funded by their government, and in many instances, that their own institutions of higher education have ties to that genocide as well. And they are fighting back against that. And they're saying, no, we refuse to allow this to happen. And we are going to organize and use our people power to fight back against that. And I think that what we've seen in fascist and authoritarian societies across space and time is that the biggest threat to authoritarian power is when people get organized and they use their own power. And like you said, these students are multi-faith, multiracial. There are tons of Jewish students involved in these protests, along with their Palestinian comrades and friends. And many more students are involved as well. I mean, we had students, there were Jewish Voice for Peace chapter students who were holding Shabbats and Passover Seders in the middle of these encampments. It's actually quite beautiful what's happening on many of these college campuses, but it poses a core threat, this kind of free thought, this progressive thinking, this organizing is a threat to the MAGA coalition that is trying to seize power in this country right now. And I'll just end by saying, I think a very clear example of that is this kind of House of Un-American Activities committee that we're seeing play out with the House Committee on Workforce and Education in the House of Representatives, where people like Elise Stefanik will start kind of a rant that begins by claiming to care about Jewish safety, which she does not. No. And will end with a kind of a tirade about trans liberation on college campuses or DEI on college campuses. We can see that they're trying to start by attacking the Palestinian rights movement, like Doug was saying, but in a way that opens the door to attack more and more communities.
Thank y'all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, share this channel. Make sure that everybody subscribes to the YouTube channel. 70% of people are lurking, watching these shows and not subscribing. Why would you do that? So make sure that you like, subscribe, and throw some comments. And thank you all for joining the Joy Reid Show. See you on the next one. And goodbye for now.